So earlier this week, Bungie put out their glaive fix, but along with it came some very substantial nerfs to the glaive. And at this point, the only thing that glaive really has left is the shield. So for a while, the fun part about glaives was being able to build everything up to a one-shot, and then you just walk around one-shotting people with it. But it needs two really big buffs to be able to do that. And Unstoppable Force used to fill this need, but unfortunately, as I predicted, there's just no reason why it should be 30% when it's so easy to pick up. They did nerf it down to 20%, and 30% to 20%, 20% is still a pretty big buff, but it's now not enough. So even with Unstoppable up with its 20%, in combination with Bubble or Well, it results in a resilience check at 195 HP, which is honestly pretty low resilience compared to what people are traditionally running now. Maybe 2 years ago this would have been fine, but now everyone's running high resilience, and so it's probably not going to pass that check. So basically this can no longer reliably one-shot with Unstoppable Force. Unstoppable Force, I think, is still the best PvE damage perk, but a glaive in the Crucible two-shots without needing any precision anyways. So is there even a reason to use a damage perk if you can't get it to one-shot? I would argue no, and we're going to, again, take a look at the perks later. But another thing that they nerfed was the melee. Oh, look at that. Now it does less against champions, mini-bosses, bosses, and vehicles. So a lot of things took a pretty substantial nerf to how much damage are being done against them with the melee. And then also in the Crucible, they reduced it from 75 to 67. So with the 3-hit combo, that's exactly 201 health, which is still enough to down anyone at tier 10 resilience, but I mean, why not just use 2 melees at this point? 67 also has effects past just the melee. For example, if you're panicking, a fairly reliable thing you could do was just melee and then take a shot immediately right after that. Well, now that does 197 as opposed to the previous 205. So again, it's a resilience check, and you could argue that it's fair to nerf that because of this line above, where now it works with Synthosaps, Wormgod Caress, and Winter's Guile. And I've seen on Twitter and stuff that people are excited to use Wormgod with the glaive, but you know what else would do the same thing with Wormgod on? A regular unpowered melee, which has a faster TTK on the shift, it has higher DPS, a wider area of recognition, it won't interfere with your rate of fire as much on either side, plus if you've got a powered melee, knockout, or roaring flames, you get other benefits that just aren't on the glaive melee. So I'm wondering, why did they make them compatible with these exotics if it's just going to end up being the same as a regular melee by taking the damage down like that? Did they really need to nerf the damage for this? Were they worried that people would get 2 stacks of burning fists with the glaive melee fast enough to be able to 2-shot the third person fast enough? I don't like it. That's just a crazy thing for them to do for something that I guarantee no one is going to try past like one match. And this leaves glaives in a really tough spot. I'll get to the perks in a second, but the only thing left is the shield, because the melee's awful. They made it worse. The best perk was Unstoppable Force, which is the whole reason they could one-shot in the first place, basically. But for now, I'm just going to tell you what glaive I'll be using from now on, and go on about the perks and why I want to use that one after, if that's all you want to know, and just leave the video or whatever. But I'll be using Nezarac's Sin with, or not Nezarac's Sin, I'll be using Nezarac's Whisper with Genesis and Adrenaline Junkie. And the reason why is because I think I'm still going to be using Ashen Wake on that one. And with Genesis, in the same TWAB, they changed it to trigger on breaking player shields. Now, it doesn't seem that it's going to be like the other shield break things where you have to match the element to their subclass while they're in a super. It just says on breaking player shields. And bypass, like every shot on a glaive is going to break their shield. So you could, in theory, just completely bypass every single reload on the glaive and never have to do it, which was one of the biggest problems with the glaive in my opinion. They have a really low magazine size and they take forever to reload. And on some of them they have 5 in the magazine, which is just a weird number because you'll have 1 shot left. So it won't tell you you're out of special, but if you aren't paying attention, you'll use that 1 shot and then not have anything to follow it up with because you won't realize that you don't have enough in the magazine to take out a third person. But yeah, with the reload, this was something I was really looking forward to. In my last video I said that I would accept pulse monitor, but I think this is even kind of crazier. So that's what I'm going to be using, is Nezarec with Genesis and Adrenaline Junkie for the grenade builds. For like the Stasis Warlock, where you'll not be relying on grenade kills, I would probably just stick with the Enigma and use Unstoppable Force still for PvE. And then this column, probably I'm debating between Impulse Amplifier and Grave Robber, but I'll probably just be running Frenzy for the Crucible and Thresh, maybe. Just because Frenzy has 50 handling and 50 reload speed. We don't really care about the damage, but that 50 handling and 50 reload speed will really help it out. And then maybe Thresh, just because, you know, always good to have more super. But yeah, a glaive that I would really want that is not in existence right now is a Stasis Glaive with Genesis and Chill Clip. I think that would be probably the best glaive that will ever possibly come out, unless they introduce some crazy new perk that works perfectly with the glaive that just makes it completely busted. Hi, I forgot to explain why Chill Clip. Basically, once you hit them with the first slow, this follow-up shot is going to be a lot easier to hit them because they can't move as well, they can't jump, all that sort of stuff. And then on the second one, they'll freeze and potentially shatter. I don't know, because the glaive is all explosive damage. I'm not sure how that will work with shattering. But yeah, getting up that follow-up shot a lot easier after they're slowed is the primary motivator, but also for PvE. That shatter damage, as we've seen with like Riptide and things like that, is actually pretty strong there too. But yeah, let's look at the perks real quick, because now that Unstoppable Force is on 20% instead of the 30, let's just take a look at what damage options we have. So there's Unstoppable Force. Again, even with Bubble or Well, it would be a resilience check. So 20% is not really considerable. The damage perk on Frenzy, I don't think you should ever use Frenzy for the damage perk. You would want to use it for the stats, because, like, why use Frenzy, which will take 12 seconds to start up, to give you a 15% extra damage, when Unstoppable Force can trigger immediately under the same circumstances and give you 20%. And then they both have the same 5 seconds of going in between where they deactivate. So I don't see a reason to use Frenzy for the damage ever when Unstoppable Force is also there. But for Rampage, the glaive cannot kill fast enough and does not have enough in the magazine to get up to 3 stacks. Like, as soon as you reload, Rampage is just going to be gone. And then we've got Thresh, but Kill Clip also is getting reduced. It was kind of an iffy choice before, just again because of the super long reload, but now it's like, again, why not still use Unstoppable Force? Like, it was the king in this slot, and it still kind of is for damage, but at this point it's like, why would you want damage if you're not going to be able to change any TTK? And then Unrelenting is basically useless on a glaive. So that's the Enigma. Let's take a look at Lubre's Ruin. You've got Swashbuckler. That does get up to 35, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Bait and Switch. This is the strongest buff, but good luck proccing that in PvP. And I also don't see any reason to use it in PvE. Like, why, in what scenario would you have Heavy, be willing to use it, but switch to the glaive for your increased damage. Like, if you're gonna go through all your weapons, why not have like bait and switch cataclysmic or something like that? I don't see why you would want to use the glaive as your DPS rather than heavy, which you need to have to use this. Surrounded is basically useless for PvP, and then we've got Unstoppable Force, Wellspring, which and then again Unrelenting, useless on a glaive. And then we've got Nezarec's Whisper. Let's take a look at what it's got in the damage perks. Same thing, Unstoppable Force, Vorpal, Frenzy. This one has Adaptive Munitions, which, okay. I don't know why. There are a lot of better options than a glaive for breaking shields in PvE, especially since Genesis does need you to still match it on the shield, so I don't see anything in this column that would really go with adaptive munitions. There are just better options for that if that's what you want. And then we've got Adrenaline Junkie and Turnabout. Turnabout, basically useless. So, revisiting on Lubre, the Vorpal and Swashbuckler. The thing about Vorpal is the super that you're trying to hit would have to have more than 30% damage resistance for it to survive 2 of just the normal attack, or the 2 of the normal projectile rather. So I don't know off the top of my head which supers get that much damage resistance. The only one that comes to mind is Well, which the healing basically makes glaives not usable against. And that reminds me also, between all this, the nerf to Unstoppable Force now means that a glaive cannot take out a bubble. So the most annoying super in the game, well, maybe the second most behind Shadebinder, has one less thing to deal with. And they're like, oh, well, somewhere in here, they're like, we're adding hawk weapons to work against bubble, and it's going to be a big buff. But if you're even if they doubled the damage of hawk weapons against bubble, I don't think it would be enough in the entire magazine to break the bubble. Like, just sitting there unloading an entire magazine into the bubble, the Titan just has to step out for half a second and then hit you with a special weapon and one-shot you. Like, I don't understand why they're... Like, at this point, the only thing you can do against a bubble is to try and knock them out with one of the shoulder charges or to counter super it. And I'm not sure what they want us to do against a bubble when it's the fastest charging super, especially in like zone control and things like that. But anyways, but that's such a situational case, and even then you would have to take 2 shots against a super, which could probably take 2 shots in the same amount of time against you. And so I'm not sure how often Vorpal will actually come into play in PvP. And then the other one, Swashbuckler. Swashbuckler, yeah, the glaive can do a melee, and you'll get the 30% for the projectile, but good luck getting a kill with the melee when the glaive melee just got nerfed to where if they have any sort of damage resistance, any healing, any restoration, any overshield, like there are so many ways that they can stop you from getting the 3 combo off, and then all they have to do is punch you twice. Like, I think Swashbuckler is too difficult for the glaive to pick up, but you have to have the glaive out to use it. I don't think it's as reliable as it would seem in PvP. But as for Adrenaline Junkie, that's a different story because you can still stay at range with Adrenaline Junkie. You can throw the grenade immediately after a shot for a quick TTK, and then it'll give you enough damage to one-shot, but only for 4.5 seconds. And so going back to Swashbuckler, same thing, 4.5 seconds. Like, it's almost impossible to get the entire combo off and still have enough health left, because they're probably going to melee you during a 3-swing combo to immediately go into a second engagement to try and get the one shot and hope you have like Charge with Light or something that can push it over to be able to one shot. I just don't think that Swashbuckler is the play, and even Adrenaline Junkie is very questionable because I've only gotten it to work once generally, while using the glaive, because it's just so slow. and swapping it to another weapon that has Adrenaline Junkie is also slow, and it's just not very likely that someone else is going to be in the area too. The timer on it is just so short. But then, like, again, what other perks are even in this column? There's, like, it's all damage perks, and then Wellspring and Unrelenting. I'm not seeing any reason to run anything in here except for maybe Thresh or Frenzy for the stats, not even the damage. I don't know. In summary, I still think Ashen Wake is the play just because it's a fast TTK, it's easy, you barely have to aim, it builds up Roaring Flames so you can just throw the grenade eventually. It'll passively give you shield, and it will, you don't have to worry about grenade cooldown or anything like that. But the Void Warlock now needs to use Nothing Manacles rather than Secant, I think, since the Empowering Rift takes too long to cast for you to take advantage of Adrenaline Junkie. Like, that eats up so much of that 4.5 seconds just to cast that rift. Yeah, so now with Nothing Manacles, it's the same thing as Ashen Wake. You just take the shot, you throw the grenade, and now you have Devour up and the stacks of Adrenaline Junkie, and then you can run around because you'll be at full health, and the one shot will extend Adrenaline Junkie as well as Devour, so you can just loop that until you run out of Devour, basically, or Adrenaline Junkie. Bungie's wild for nerfing the glaive so hard. Like, almost nobody uses the glaives in the first place, and people complained about the shield, so they nerfed the shield. Now they're nerfing the melee, they're nerfing Unstoppable Force. Like, there's just... They're basically burying the glaive. I don't see why anyone would use a glaive after this change, if I'm being honest.